Hello and welcome to another episode of Pop Life, brought to you by the wonderful people of This Is Revolution podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So glad to have you with us. If you're a returning listener or subscriber, hell yeah! You are the driving force in the TIR machine. After the show tonight, we will be heading into the Champagne Room to discuss the passing of two music legends, D'Angelo and Ace Frehley from Kiss, died today. MT will be joining me, so get ready to take a ride on the Chuckle Bus. Don't forget, tomorrow at 6 p.m., all paid YouTube subscribers and patrons will have access to another watch party. We'll be continuing our horror movie month here on TIR, and we'll be watching the 1989 body horror classic Society. So if you'd like to join us for that and support programming like this, then become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. You get access to the Champagne Room and get to join us for all of these fun movie night watch parties like the one we're having tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Now, let's talk a little music industry madness. Recently here on TIR, we checked out the docuseries Nothing But a Good Time, all about the rise and fall of the Sunset Strip metal scene. Now, what made this one stand out wasn't just the glammed out look, the riffs, or the chaos. It was hearing from the people behind the scenes, specifically managers like Doc McGee and Alan Niven. These dudes offered a totally different lens, not the usual rock god worship, but the reality of what it actually takes to keep the machine running. Their parts felt like the antidote to all that nostalgia fluff. No myths, no hero worship, just the messy truth, addictions, money mismanagement, groupies, lawsuits, and tragedy. It's not the dream, it's the business behind the dream. I actually met our guest years ago when a close friend of mine joined one of the bands on his roster. From day one, he was an open book, straight shooter, full of insight, and someone who actually gets the human side of this business. He's been doing this for over 2 decades, working with bands like The Starting Line, Underoath, Almost. Please give a big TIR welcome to Randy Nichols. Randy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I don't know if you remember that day, but it was the Almost first show, and a good friend of mine had joined that band, and he was like, "Hey, we're doing a show in Southern California. I'm from the Bay Area. I live in Mexico now. I drove all the way down." We hung out that night and definitely met you the next morning, the morning of the show. And it was a lesson, I think, like a music lesson. I've been interviewing people upon meeting them probably my entire life. So you were one of the precursors to what I'm doing now. But it was a bunch of crazy stories you told me. And I really appreciate all the sage words of advice that you gave. I got to be a fly on the wall of a band. It was an offshoot band, but still a band doing their first thing, their first show. So when did you get started in the music industry? How did you fall into music management? Because this is part of the industry that people kind of fall into.
You couldn't be more right about falling in. And it's kind of interesting because I would almost describe it as like if somebody jumped off a building and then hit the tree, then hit the awning, then hit a truck, and then hit the ground. Like it wasn't a straight fall in, but it was, I'll give you the super short, long version, but in high school, I had friends who had a band. And, I wanted to manage their band because it just seemed like a cool thing to do. I knew nothing about it. I didn't get to be the manager. One of my other friends got to be the manager, but I was the one who had a car. So I drove the band around to go to their local shows. And that was my first attempt in. Then I got to college and a friend of mine was a college rep for Sony.
Okay.
And this is in like the early to mid 90s where Sony was putting out like Rage Against the Machine, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, just so many, you know, really important bands at the time.
Mhm.
And with her, she didn't have a car. Came back to me having a car once again. She was from the Bronx, didn't
Mhm.
have a car, and I would drive her around Long Island and bring her into the city to do all the things she needed to do. And I got to know all the people she worked with. Got me one step closer, but I still wasn't in. And, one night I was at a show with, I think it was Ned's Atomic Dustbin, which I don't know how many
Mm.
people will remember them, but there'll be people listening who have heard of
Mhm.
them. They were
Mhm.
like an important alternative band in the mid 90s. And I met someone at that show who needed an intern. And at that, fell in, got an internship, was doing various internships for years. And as I was coming to an end in college, there was one area that I hadn't interned yet, which was at a booking agency, which is being the
Mm.
agent to set up tours for bands.
Mhm.
And this is going back, I'm 52, so this is going back pre-internet, and there were books that Polestar magazine, which was the live touring industry magazine, and
Mhm.
they had these books that were like of agencies, managers. I literally picked open this book and said, let me find agencies that have bands that I like that look like these bands are going to blow up and they're going to need to hire more staff.
Interesting.
And yeah, and that was my goal. Was I'm towards the end of school. The
Mhm.
best way to get a job is somewhere where you're a warm body already there and they just need more people because they're killing it. And my plan worked flawlessly. Like, last day of school, took my finals, and went in and started my full-time job because the company was growing so fast and they trusted me and hired me.
How much has changed in the industry? Because even hearing that story, I'm 48. We're not that far off in
Yeah.
age. But we both come up in a time where there was this thing called street teams. We
Yes,
both
I
come up in a
almost used that
time.
word.
A friend of mine said something a long time ago, maybe like 15 years ago. We were talking and we were talking about street teams. Like, what happened to street teams? He was like, this is the age of the doer.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to support anymore. There were people that wanted to support artists. There were people like yourselves that wanted to get involved in the industry, not necessarily being a figure piece of it, but maybe being a behind the scenes person. Do you see a lot of the mechanisms that helped you get into the industry kind of go away with what we have now?
So, yes and no, and I
Okay.
honestly think it's better now. And I'll throw a couple of things out there and say, street team doesn't exist in the same sense anymore. But what you do have is influencers on every, social media platform.
Mhm.
And on these social media platforms, people are promoting what they believe in. They're just using the tools of the day to tell people about what they love. So I feel like the street team is a little less organized by most, but I think it thoroughly still exists. And, like, I'm also a believer. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people who long for yesteryear. I'm a And it doesn't matter what genre, what world, whatever you're in, last year was better, the
Mm,
bands were better, the parties were better, the
mhm,
alcohol was better, the drugs were better, the guys or girls were better, the
mhm,
politics were better. Doesn't
mhm.
matter. Everybody longs for yesteryear, and I'm just about what's next in the future. And I'm really about embracing what's coming next, and that excites me. So while a lot has changed, and I'll share a couple of examples because I know you asked that question, but
Mhm.
I love the change. And I think there's so much more positive in it than people want to give to it. But when I started, we didn't have internet, we didn't have email, and there was an internet, but it was so early that my first job at this booking agency that I was mentioning,
Mhm.
we had one AOL email address that the entire company shared. There was a computer in more or less a storage closet that went on the
Wow.
internet. And because it was right next to like the fastest connection to have a good connection, and people would go and check this computer. And we had one email address that the company never got any emails on. And my focus was the fax machine and the telephone.
The
That's how
fax
I
machine.
managed communication with the
Yeah.
world. And, that's progress I could tell you I'm quite happy about the differences of. And
The technological advancements has made
yeah,
life
but
a
you
lot
know
easier.
what? Those advances
Mhm.
really it improved lifestyle, it improved the ability to deliver for your clients.
Hmm.
But what it changed for a lot of people is the ability to think fast and problem solve. And I'll give you a
Mm.
great
Oh,
example. I had
please.
an issue back in that era, and this is, to refresh people's minds or educate people if they didn't know, there were no cell phones in this era either, other than, your giant, shoebox size phones that really rich people had.
Mhm.
So, like, I had an instance once where I was booking this band and a show was canceled and had to get in touch with the band to tell them, "Don't drive to the show." And,
Mm.
and they'd flown somewhere, I remember. Then they were driving and then they were gonna go to the next show and the next show. So it wasn't like the whole situation was lost. And I had to get in touch with them. And I still remember I knew they were renting a car, and I called the car rental place in the airport and tracked them down, calling there a little while after their plane landed to leave a message to make sure that they got in touch with me in the airport. And I feel like people have lost those types of skills. And I don't know why I still remember this story,
Mhm.
but it's just we found ways to get it done. And I think there's less problems sometimes today. So I think people's problem solving skills aren't quite as good as some of us once had. But overall, I mean, the concept hasn't changed one bit, which is an artist is trying to figure out how to build a fan base. And you need to use the tools that you have to get people to love your band. And it may have been street teaming, which you used,
Mhm.
which you mentioned before, handing out flyers, talking to people. But at the end of the day, it's all identical is a song hits you right here in the heart,
Mhm.
you love it, and you tell someone else, and a fan base is built. And I don't care what technology it is, if a song emotionally hits you,
Mhm.
you're going to tell someone else using whatever tools you use, and that's completely the same.
Are songs still hitting people in that emotional place like they hit us so many years ago? Because music is just so ubiquitous. Like there was a time where we only had so much money, and we only had a chance to get one thing, maybe two things at a record store, and we thumbed through CDs or tapes or vinyl, whatever era you grew up in. Maybe there's a cat at the record store that liked the genre you liked, and that was the cat that you went to, or they knew you because you went there so much, and they're like, "Oh, Randy, we got a new blah 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 for you. Check that out." Has that changed, or am I just an old man yelling at trains?
So I think to a large degree, you're an old man yelling. But what I think has changed is the flow of music.
Mhm.
We used to be able to have a good idea of everything that came out new in a given week. And nowadays, it's a fire hose. Not only is it a fire hose, but it is the world's largest fire hose, the size of the Empire State Building, just
Mhm.
shooting out new music constantly.
Mhm.
But of that, through the new devices that people connect to culture with,
Mhm.
they are still connecting and hearing music that's important to them. And like you may hear at some point in time in this conversation we're having on the other side of these doors
Mhm.
in my office, a 10 and 12-year-old kid out there.
Mhm.
And I'm very happy to say that music hits those kids and that I'm yelling at them to turn it down or stop singing so loud.
Yeah.
And for me, honestly, like I want my kids to love music and blast music. For me, it's quit singing the same song over and over again. Give me something else, like
Gotcha.
But what's important with that, to kind of go with to what you're talking about, is I get a lot of the same songs over and over to the point where they make me sick. Like in my house right now, Ophelia by Taylor Swift is just constant. And granted, she's, the mega star,
Mhm,
that everyone's listening to,
mhm,
but that music is driving the same emotional connection to people that music of our day connected with us. And it's not fake. And like, this is somebody who's not a fan of her music,
mhm.
but I took my 10 and 12-year-old to Taylor Swift last summer at Wembley Stadium in London. And watching my daughter cry and my kids interact with all the people around them,
Mhm.
and the energy and the community. Like, this sort of won't make sense to a lot of people, but it really does. It reminded me of, like, the Grateful Dead hippie jam band community,
Mhm,
where everyone had love for each other,
mhm.
and there was this shared passion. And while her music to a lot of us may be sugary pop drivel, there is a real community, and this music is really important to them. And I think a lot of people miss that and just write those kinds of things off because they're old, screaming at the sky.
Yeah, I never wanna be the person that writes off what younger people like because I don't dig it 'cause sometimes it's just not for you, right? I'm 48, there's no reason why Taylor Swift is gonna make music for me, she shouldn't. It's
Exactly.
it's not cost effective. Um, but tell me a little bit about what was the first band you actually managed, and what did that consist of? Because I think managing a band for a lot of people is like a record producer, where they hear the term, they've seen maybe interviews with these people, but there's an imagined idea of what they do. And the other night, here on the channel, we watched a docu-series about the hair metal scene in LA called Nothing But a Good Time. Um, and they had two managers in it, Doc McGee and Alan Niven, who I think I wouldn't say just brought clarity, but brought kind of a stark realism to the conversation to really break through the myth making that is the rock god or rock stars, however you want to call them. And they kind of talk about how much of a mess some of these people were. Um, you get into this business not in the 80s and not in LA, but that doesn't mean people aren't a mess. What was the first band that you took on, and what was that like?
Yeah, so before we get to that, I have to tell you, I've been watching that series too. I'm only one episode in, and hearing you talk about it reminds me that I need to jump in and finish it because it is really good. I
Mhm.
have to mention one other thing with documentaries that are real as all hell about music, and this one happens to be about metal as well.
Yeah.
But oh shoot, now I'm forgetting their
The
name.
new one that
What
just
was
came out?
No, no, so I'm talking about I'm watching the new one that you're talking about right now, but
Mhm.
it was the '80s metal band, and I'm forgetting their name, Anvil,
Anvil.
the Anvil documentary. I don't know if you saw
Yes.
that, but I know a lot of people watched that and thought it was great. Some people thought it was funny, various things.
Mhm.
I watched that film as if it was a horror film.
Yes.
And it was everything that I feared for my clients and myself and my life, that this is what it's going to turn into. That I'm
Mhm.
like 60 years old and still fighting for relevance and still fighting to get people to finally care about me. And like that movie like shook me. So
Yeah.
it's just interesting how, there's not a lot of realism in
No.
documentaries about music. And I think it's important for people to understand these are real people. Everything, we want to glorify the story, we want to love the story, but we need to humanize these people, whether it be about mental health issues and struggles that people
Yeah.
have, or just struggles to pay the bills. Like, so many musicians that people are listening to this right now idolize somebody who is struggling to just basically survive, but they've touched their lives in such a serious way. And just something to remind people of. It's important. But yeah, I didn't mean to go off on such a
No, no,
tangent, but
no.
that
I
film
look,
really hit me.
No. I watched the Anvil thing when it came out, and I was tour managing a band at the time, and we had watched it before we had left, or when we came back, I think, from a big US run. And I remember the first part of it where people are kind of laughing, and then as it progresses, people aren't laughing because, like you said, that Anvil documentary becomes a reality. I later lived in a warehouse practice space in West Oakland that had a lot of bands that kind of had that similar trajectory where it didn't really hit for them as big as it
Yeah.
did for some of their peers. Um, and maybe they did those Anvil shows where they're like, in the place in Europe for a small handful of people. Um, so the Anvil thing, I think, is too real for people. It's almost like Spinal Tap in a way, where it
Yeah.
hits this nerve where it scares you because you have to ask a question when you watch something like that: is, am I doing this for real, or am I playing pretend? Am I running away from adulthood? Like these are real questions that people get really scared to ask.
Yeah. You're not wrong, and I think about those things as a manager. I think about those things for myself and my life and my career, as
Mhm.
well as for my clients. Like, should I tell them it's time to stop and hang it up? It's
Mm.
not like most of the time that's not what we're dealing with, but I have been there at moments with artists before, and it's like, maybe your life would be better off if you weren't doing this anymore. And you're like, those are really hard things to talk about.
Mm. Mm. See, this is why I'm so glad you agreed to come on the show, because this is reminding me of that. It was the chain reaction,
Yeah.
backstage at Chain Reaction so many years ago. Um, how do you tell someone? I'm not going to say names.
No, it's fine.
Our mutual friend that we know and that was in the band that you managed, he had told me that they had done a tour, and it was like a US run, and they were opening for a larger band, and it was great. And then they did a headlining run playing in the same rooms, and it was half cap.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that when I say that is, if the room holds 3,000 people, 1,500 show up. If you play in a small band, that sounds like the greatest thing in the world. But when you look out into a room that holds 3,000 people and only a few are there, and they talk about that on the Nothing But a Good Time documentary towards the end of the hair scene, where I think it was the Trickster guys were playing with Kiss at the Arco Arena, and they had 1,500 sold in a 22,000 seat room. So hearing stories mildly similar from a buddy, it's so disheartening and kind of frightening because you're never going to see that unless you're there. That's not going to be part
Yeah.
of their social media, you know.
Like, no, exactly. And I'll give you an example. I share way more than I probably should, but like, these things are just they're conversations. They're
Yeah.
typically when somebody's in a vulnerable moment and they're asking questions and they're talking. These are not things that you walk up to someone and just say, time to take a break. But, in this instance, I was managing the starting line years ago, before they kind of went on a hiatus. And they kind of did everything they had wanted to do at the time, had been beaten up, spit out multiple times by the major label system, just fucking them.
Mhm.
And they were still doing really well as a band. But, we kind of looked at every direction to go next, and
Mhm.
it felt like it would be a downward step. And, I talked about maybe it's time to just take a break, step to the side. And, the example we gave at the time, and there's zero disrespect to this band, but we were talking about Saves the Day,
Mhm.
who kind of went from that through being cool into At Your Funeral era, where they were the most important, like, emo scene band.
Mhm.
And, like, they were that band playing, the quarter empty rooms. And it was really sad. And that was their favorite band. And we're like, do we want to be the next ones to do that?
Mhm.
Or should we take a step aside? Like we talked about, it's like, do you go out like Jordan and then create a demand for people to want you to come back because you didn't wear out your welcome. And we had this conversation, and they were feeling that it was time to take a step back for a while.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just that, it appeared the audiences may get smaller, and they didn't yet, but it felt like the signs were pointing to that. Their peers were taking off, and they weren't taking off in the same fashion. And they didn't necessarily want to follow the trends that their peers were doing to take off. And it just felt like stepping back was the best move. And different people in different points in their lives. And I said, all right, that feels right. And sometimes as a manager, it's to support that and help them through that versus say, no, you can't give up. Because if I told them, no, you can't give up, you need to just keep fighting, what outcome was next that would have been positive to all their lives?
Mhm.
And, it very well could be that they wrote the best record ever out of those struggles. But you look at people and you see where they are mentally and just their health, like these things all come into play. Going off on a major tangent, for a second, but, I get invited a lot of times to speak at panels about mental health and music.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I talk to people about is, success isn't one metric. Success is whatever is important to you, and happiness needs to fit into that metric as well. And you could be an artist who goes out and does your first tour and it kills it. It sells out everywhere,
Mhm.
but you want to die when doing it. And if that's the case, stop doing it. Like, you don't have to keep doing it. And so many people and I think that's where we get to these mental health issues quite often in this business, especially because it just becomes you don't stop. Like there was a band, I don't know if you've ever heard of a band called the New Radicals.
Yes.
Yeah, they had that song. Forget What
Say
You Did.
what you can. Yeah.
They were huge, amazing. That song was massive.
It's huge.
They decided to stop after one album. And
Hmm.
Greg Alexander, the singer, had said it wasn't what was going to keep him mentally happy and wasn't where he felt he should be with his life. And I like to point those kind of examples out to people because he succeeded to the metrics that, the industry measures. But personally, that did not lead to happiness or, mental stability or whatever it may be. And that's okay. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Another thing, and you're coming up with some of these bands, like you guys are around the same ages. When you're so young, someone asked the question in the chat, well, what if all you know how to do is play music and tour? I've seen people, the guest that I'm having on in a few weeks that you manage doing it from such a young age. And I'm sure you think it's going to last forever. And sometimes the best and worst things that can happen to you is that you get caught up in a hype train and you get taken to some pretty high heights. Then there's kind of nowhere for it to go. And it's like, well, what do you do when all you've done is this thing for so long? And then kind of everything you've done has been successful. And now you're not successful, and you might be 29 or 30 or maybe 35. Like, how do you tell someone at that young of an age, maybe you need to sit down for a while and
Yeah, but here's the thing, to answer that person in the chat,
Mhm,
like there's one important thing, and this kind of goes to as I dive deeper when I have this conversation with people,
mhm,
more so just speaking to groups of people in the industry versus, the acts I manage.
mhm,
But it can be the acts I manage too. It's all right, so you're not happy with this, but all you know is touring and recording music. So maybe you can be writing for TV commercials. Maybe you could be a songwriter for other artists.
mhm,
Maybe you could begin producing. Maybe you can manage other bands. Maybe you go work for a record company or a streaming platform, or, there's so many other things that you can take those direct skills and go into something else. Like I managed this band called Beach Slang for a handful of years. And one of the band members kind of ran the business on the road for the band, did the tour managing and all those kind of things. And he transitioned out of being in a band. He was miserable in that band, had issues with the leader of the band who was severely mentally ill.
Hmm.
He eventually was canceled as well, but, you
Oof.
know, I really look at him as someone who was sick. Like, he
Mm.
did things that weren't good,
Mhm.
but he was mostly sick, and that was the problem, but this member just couldn't do it anymore. Like, that really beat him up dealing with somebody who was that mentally ill. But he went on to work for experiential marketing companies,
Interesting.
helping to tour manage the experiential marketing experiences that
Mhm.
companies were creating, be it
Mhm.
at festivals
Yep.
or, you know, shopping malls, wherever it was. So he took that same skill set and plugged it into something that was a healthier way to use his skills for. So, and to that person in the chat who's probably going, yeah, 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 but you know, that's the exception, not the rule. You know, it's tough, and I'm probably, you know, they're probably right about that, but you have to just kind of expand and think bigger, and where else are these skills transferable?
I mean, I've met people again living in that warehouse. I met so many bands. You meet people like this, right? They're doing this and they're doing this. You're going to meet them
Yeah.
those two places. And one of the bands I met that was doing this, I can't remember what label they were on. They were on some big label, and everybody loved them for 5 minutes. And we could tell they got in advance because they had bought a van and a trailer, and they had new gear, and they rented out the biggest room. We had this room. They filmed videos in this room, and this band rented out that room as their rehearsal space because they could park
Yeah.
their van and trailer in it for a few months, right? This was one of the, you know this story too well, right? And
Yeah.
then it doesn't hit, right? You did all the tours, it just didn't hit, didn't work out. And I ran into one of them because I did experiential marketing, and that's how I got into working at music festivals. I ended up working in the food and beverage side doing numbers. Um and I ran to this dude. I was like, "Oh, I remember you from the studio. Are you playing?" He's like, "No." He was working for one of the promoters, and then he had gotten into music management as well, because I think that's just, you kind of have a great in if you're in a band that didn't succeed, where you know people, you've met industry people, you've met all the promoters, there's avenues for you.
Yeah. And by the way, I hate that term that you didn't succeed.
Mhm.
And I'm not knocking you in any way for it, but it's just it's part of how we all view this. It's like they got signed to a major label.
Yeah.
They got to tour the US or tour the world, got all these unbelievable experiences. Is that a fail? They just didn't achieve the full potential that they hoped they could achieve. And I hate to sound hokey like that, but like think how many people would have killed to just have the experience that they had.
Oh. Oh, I mean, look, the creative arts, writing, painting, being a photographer, creating music is the only thing where someone compares you to the greatest person in that industry. If you're a fucking dentist, no one ever compares you to the, person that created dentistry in the first place. You're just like, "Oh, you're a dentist. Oh, that's cool." But you say you're a musician, like, never heard of you. Right.
Exactly. It's like an immediate insult.
Mhm.
And, you know, like, I go back to, like, one of my biggest, like, most favorite bands of all time was the Ramones.
Mhm.
Loved that band. And, you know, I've read all the books, watched all the documentaries, and, you know, there's one interview, I can't remember which member it is, but it was either I think either Joey or Johnny Ramone was talking about how the band was a failure and that they never really made it. And, you know, like, I look at the Ramones and they really were the blueprint for punk rock
Yes.
and pop punk and every band that so many of our friends are making a living off to this day is what they did. And for them to, you know, at times, and I'm sure not always, but in that vulnerable moment, to call themselves a failure too,
Mhm.
like, is just mind blowing. Because to me, that is like the Ramones, in my opinion, are way more successful than say Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy sold a
Sure.
lot more records, and I'm not dissing them in any way either. But the Ramones drove generations of culture. Fall Out Boy definitely, you know, majorly influenced a generation of culture. So, like, I don't want to take anything away from them, but how could that band that did that feel that they're a failure?
A comment in the chat here. Jason Miles, friendly reminder from the chat. Circle back to Randy's beginnings and first bands he managed. So people really want to know. They want to know, Randy. They want to know.
I was thinking that I didn't do that, so we will go there right now, and it's a two-piece story. And I'll start it with when I was a booking agent, as I mentioned before. I had one band who had fired their manager, didn't hire a new manager for a while, and was just trying to help them. They were a complete mess, couldn't get out of their own way, and was just there to help them. And, like my favorite story that I always tell of working with this band, the band was called Weston, and actually lead singer later joined and formed that other band, Beach Slang.
Okay.
So, had a long on and off relationship with this guy. But I took a meeting with them with a record company, and this was my first ever meeting working with a band and meeting with a record company. So I take this meeting with them, and wasn't their manager, but was just there to listen and help them figure things out. In this meeting, they got in such a fight with the lead of the record company, which is a guy named Greg, who owned a label called Go Kart Records, that I thought it might have come to blows. It was that bad.
Jesus.
And then we left. And this meeting with the record company was about, are they going to re-sign or not? I left, and my assumption was, well, we're not going to sign there. And the band looked at me as if I was crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? We have to. That's our home. And I was just like, were you in the same meeting as me? Like, it was just the most bonkers thing. And like, looking back at it today, talking to you, like, it almost makes more sense today to me than it did 25 years ago. 25 years ago, why would anyone in their right mind do that? Nowadays, I've seen that type of example so many times that it just, it's to be expected. So that was my first manager-ish experience. My first actual manager experience, again, I was the agent for a band, this band called the Pilfers. They were a ska punk reggae band. Ska punk dancehall reggae.
Please tell me this was like 94.
You nailed it. It might have been 95, but it was.
This had to be. This was like when that stuff was popping off. You were like, I got the next.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you were like, I'm in there. We're about to do Warped Tour.
Yeah, and we did Warped Tour, I'm sure. Although I don't remember, but I'm 99% sure we did. But this band, the singer, Jamaican dude by way of Nigeria, like amazing dancehall toaster. Then this other guy who was like a ska legend who was in this band called Bim Scala Bim, and then a couple of other people. And the singer, his name was Cooley Ranks, was in the Toasters, who were like an important ska band.
Super.
Like he was the front man for the Toasters for like a couple of album cycles.
Oh, so you double knew you had it. You were like, oh, I got ska royalty.
Oh, I totally had ska royalty between Vinny from Bim Scala Bim and Cooley from the Toasters. Like this was a band, day one, they were royalty. And they were doing something that no one was doing at the time. They played shows with like Slightly Stupid open for them, like when they were headlining, like it was just, they were at the forefront of a genre. But my proudest thing in working with them on the ska side, I got them opening for both the Specials and Madness, which is just the royalty.
Those are, that's our house. For those that don't know, Madness, like super ska legends from the 80s, both bands.
Exactly. And on like the punk rock hardcore side of things, got them opening up for the Soul Brains, which was Bad Brains' other project, which is, DC hardcore legends.
Was that Bad Brains with is his name Israel?
He was in it after HR.
Yeah,
but at that point it was HR, human rights HR, who was like
HR was in this. Okay.
Yeah, this was the HR. Soul Brains was HR. It was basically after Bad Brains kind of went away. They weren't Bad Brains, and then they did this like toned down, slower version of Bad Brains for a minute. But they opened for that group, and then on the dance hall side, they opened for Buju Banton.
Damn.
So like, I literally had this band, covered in all areas. But what I was getting at with these guys is I was their agent. As you could tell, I did a decent job as an agent. I got them on
Those are
all these
great.
different
Those are
tours.
great shows.
Yeah, and those were tours, not even shows, every
Oh,
single one of
damn.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what you want.
yeah. So I did everything that you could possibly do. And then trying to remember whether they had I remember they didn't have a manager. Sorry, my life is a long time ago sometimes.
That's
So
okay.
I was working at this booking agency. The agency was falling apart. I called Cooley Ranks, the singer, told him that I was no longer going to be their agent. The agency that I was working for kind of collapsed. And, I'm sorry to leave them. I love the guys, but, I wish them luck.
Mhm.
And he told me in like his thick, like Jamaican, like gangsta vibe, he's like, now you're the manager. He's like, your first job is to get an agent. And it wasn't like, hey, do you want to do this? It was Cooley Ranks told me what I'm doing. And I was like 21, 22 years old. He was like 35 or 36. He was the softest, tough guy in the world, but, like
Mhm.
big, tough Jamaican guy tells me what to do. Not
Just shut
arguing.
up. Yeah, shut up and do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You just shut up and do it. And found him an agent, continued working with them through a good chunk of their career. Then, like a lot of these bands, they broke up. They got back together again later, but they broke up and kind of went our own ways. But every like 6 or 7 years, I'll run into Cooley Ranks and he says the same thing to me every time. A huge smile breaks out on his face. And I told you you're the manager. And like
Aw.
he owns it and he deserves it. Like
Mhm.
some people say, oh, this guy said, I did this. And it's like, no, he fucking did it. And so much love back at him for that. But I became a manager because Cooley Ranks told me to.
Why didn't you stay in that world? Was it just too many angry Jamaicans?
Nah.
You're like, I don't know
I
about
like my
this.
angry Jamaicans. Man, I love that world. It's funny. I'll go to Jamaica on vacation,
Mhm.
every however many years, and like start talking to locals and like name drop like dancehall acts. Are like, wait, weird little white boy from New York knows all our shit. Like,
You're
I,
like,
I I love having a
mhm.
little piece of that world. It definitely confuses people.
Um, so you're managing a ska band in the moment
Yep.
where ska is hot.
Oh yeah.
Um, how do you pivot from ska to this I don't know what to call anything anymore, alternative rock stuff? Was it just something that was adjacent in your world? Were these just people that were you just building up a roster? Were you thinking about building up a roster? Like, what was going through your mind when you got that phone call? Was it, looks like I'm going to be a manager, or was it, I need to find another booking agency to go work for?
Yeah, so in that moment, I was looking to see was there another booking agency, and interesting story. I went to go meet at a company called the Agency Group at the time, who is
Mhm.
now UTA that it merged into, which is one of the major
One
agencies.
of the biggest ones. Yeah.
And they wanted to hire me, but wanted me to help steal all the clients from the guy whose company was collapsing. I was
Mhm.
just like, nah, this guy gave me my start. It's like, all right, clearly I'm not going to do this job because the only reason people want me is to see what I could do to steal from someone else. It's
Mhm.
like, got to do something else. And ended up getting a record company gig and was working a record company gig and managing on the side. But I really didn't know at that point in my life what I wanted to do. I mean, I still don't know what I want to do. I feel like we all have some of that in us. But just kind of did that and was working at a record company and managing on the side. But where the transition to the scene and the world of today,
Mhm.
how some of that came about is on right around 9/11, in 2001 was around the time that I stopped working with the Pilfers. I lost a job that I had at a record company at the time.
Mhm.
You couldn't you couldn't really look for work in New York. Like it was a really weird time. And I didn't know what to do. And before that, just good side note story. I was looking for a job before 9/11 and was just calling people, emailing them, and literally started something that I called the Randy Nichols Needs a Job newsletter, and was just emailing everyone I knew once a week, being like, I'm sitting here on the beach drinking a margarita, and all I want to do is be at a desk in your office. And just,
Oh, okay. Hmm.
yeah, slightly humorous, but just like, hey, don't forget about me.
Mhm.
And that kind of transformed into a website. And like, this is a website in 2001. It was really early on. I figured out how to build a very basic website where I was just posting random things. And I built kind of this viral social media moment over looking for a job
Mhm.
when, you didn't have social media moments yet, to the point where on like September 8th, 2001, I was interviewed by not the New York Times, by the LA Times about my Randy Needs a Job website and newsletter.
Oh,
And
wow.
the article never ran because it was supposed to run like just after 9/11, and like,
And
literally
then
the
9/11
world
happened.
changed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But that newsletter, by the way, just one other funny side note, a friend who went on to like run a massive ad agency that he sold to one of the big firms for, a bunch of money.
Mhm.
Every time I see him, he still to this day looks at me and goes, Randy Nichols needs a job. And I was like, to me, that tells me I won. If a guy run, an agency,
Yeah.
that's what he remembers. It's like, did my thing. Like, check the right box for this guy.
I mean, and before social media too. I mean, I think that goes back to something you said earlier about not having a certain kind of problem solver skill set, because so many
Yeah.
things are ready made for us to use and do, you know. Um, and there you are needing a job, and you probably literally went to places. You probably actually walked into offices.
You did whatever you
Yeah.
had to do. And in that moment where, and this is the transition to these other bands that you would ask me,
Mhm.
I had friends who ran a record label called Drive Through Records.
Yeah.
And I knew them from before they started the label. They did a Duran Duran tribute record that was released by Mojo Records, which was the ska label, which both the Pilfers were on, and Real Big Fish, who I had been Real Big Fish's booking agent when I
Mhm.
was an agent. So I befriended them in this era, met them at like a Less Than Jake or a Lifetime show, one of those transitional bands that like connected the dots between the two eras.
Mhm.
And they really wanted to start a management company. And I was reluctant to do it, kept pushing back, saying no. And I reached the point where I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I might as well give this a shot with them. And I moved to California and started started a management company out of their record label office in January of 2002, with the first band being the Starting Line, second band being a band called Finch.
Oh,
And
no shit. You managed
yeah,
Finch?
yeah,
Oh,
that's a
no
whole other
shit.
story. So I managed Finch for just like that much time,
Mhm.
and Mark and Tom from Blink 182 stole them from me because they decided they
Son of
wanted
a
to be managers.
bitch. Son of
We coming for you.
We got damn.
So to tie how this whole conversation started
Mhm, mhm,
together with this,
mhm.
I was backstage with Finch at the Roxy
In
in
LA?
LA. Yep.
Yep, I know
And
exactly where
Mark,
you were. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Right where we were talking about, you were
Uh-huh,
talking about before I even came in the conversation.
mhm,
Mark and Tom come walking in the room, not knowing who the hell I am. And then, I've nothing but love for these guys. Even in that moment, it was hard to be mad at them.
mhm,
But like, these guys just come in the room and start pitching them on managing them in front of me,
mhm.
having no clue that I'm the manager. And I'm kind of having this, holy shit, it's Blink 182, but holy shit, Blink 182 is trying to steal from me, both going on in my head at the same time.
Was What It Is to Burn dropped already?
Yes, it was literally What It Is to
Oh,
Burn was blowing up.
damn.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question about Real Big Fish in the chat. Super chat from Dizzle McFizzle. Thank you so much, Dizzle. Is Real Big Fish as cool in person as they are on stage? Asking for a friend.
Yes. So mostly yes. And again, like I said, I am as transparent as they come.
Yes, he is.
So the original lineup of the band, I don't know some of the newer versions. The only person left is Aaron Barrett, who's the singer. But the original version of the band, everyone was cool as fuck. Aaron was a little weird. But not a bad guy. What I'll say is what a lot of people don't realize is people on stage can be very different off stage. And
Okay.
he was kind of very quiet and awkward off stage.
Mhm.
So the rest of the band kind of brought what Aaron brought on stage the other through 23 hours a day. And he was this introverted, quiet guy the other 23 hours a day. So not a bad guy, but it was just, different. But it was a blast working with those guys. I'm still friends with some of them to this day. And when I say some of them, it's just I don't cross paths with all of them. And I'll
Yeah.
I'll see Aaron, like if Real Big Fish does a show somewhere and I'm around, I'll pop in and say hi to him and like love the guy.
Oh man, I have so many Finch questions now because I wasn't the biggest fan of that first record, but they had a second record that didn't sell as well.
Yeah.
But I thought it was way better, maybe a more mature sound, right?
Yeah. People love that record.
I really dug that second record, and it's crazy that those dudes did that to you at that place. Again, we were watching Nothing But a Good Time, and a lot of it has to do with it's all about the Sunset Strip. So that is on the Sunset Strip. For those that don't know, the Roxy is next to the Rainbow, like they share a parking lot. So
Yeah. Had
I
to
know
tie it all in for you
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Like,
it tied it
tie a little bow.
all in. That is the most LA shit that could possibly happen to a person. Blink 182 walks in and steals your band at the freaking Roxy
Yeah.
on the
And
Sunset Strip.
even funnier, there was one guy in the band whose name was also Randy, who's the guitarist, who I loved, he loved me, and he was refusing to accept that the band was firing me and hiring them. And like it literally reached the point where I was like, Randy, you need to stand down and don't cause yourself problems with your band. Like it's
Yeah.
all gonna be okay. But it was cool to see, like it was the first moment I saw like loyalty in that scenario
Mm,
from someone where people were trying to fuck me and other people had my back and like I in return had his back and be like, don't jeopardize your position in your band over me. It's just not worth it because it became like a huge fight. But funny point of that also though is Randy didn't think they would actually fire me. So like they were signing records, as the record was coming out, this thing with Mark and Tom was going on. So it didn't all happen at once. It happened over, like a month or two. And I asked them to sign a copy of What It Is to Burn for me.
mhm.
And Randy signs mine, Mark and Tom say hi, just like making a joke about the whole situation. And I still have somewhere, I don't know where, an autographed copy of that referencing that moment.
That's so crazy. Do you have any I had Tom Warman on this show. I don't know if you know Tom. Tom
No.
was an A&R turned music producer, and he produced tons of the what we're gonna later call glam metal records. He did LA Guns, he did Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil and Theater of Pain. He did I think he did Blue Oyster Cult.
Nice.
He did a bunch of records, right? He's an old
Yeah.
school A&R guy. And so I had to ask him, I said, what was one of the bigger bands that you thought was going to be huge that a label passed on? And you know what band he told me, Randy?
Who?
Kiss.
Oh God. Rest
He
in
found
peace.
them when they were Wicked Lester, and he
Wow.
brought the label over to see them. He's like, this is going to be the next big thing. And they had the makeup on, and the label president's like, "What the hell is this? This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life." It ends up being Kiss. So I have to
Yeah,
ask.
it's happened to like every artist though. Like I love those stories.
I have to ask. What has happened to you? Is there a band that you passed on that you were like, maybe not? That
So
ended up
I
blowing up.
have Yeah, I
Mhm.
have to be careful with my response to this one. And as you can
Okay.
tell, I'm not typically careful.
I'm
So if
not trying to
somebody
get you in trouble at all. I'm not
no,
trying to.
you're not gonna get me in trouble, but if somebody really knows my life and connected the dots, they may be able to figure this one out. But I'm not gonna say it. I met with a band many years ago
Mhm,
who was firing their former management as they
mhm,
were just starting to blow up. And I had asked them, like, why are you firing them? Like, what is wrong with the situation? And the key thing they told me is they're bigger than their management now. Like they're the biggest band on their roster,
Mhm.
and their management doesn't know how to handle them because they're so much bigger.
Mhm.
And they weren't that much bigger, to be clear, also. Like my management had been through this, they had their issues, but they knew what they were doing for the most part.
Mhm.
And I didn't say this to them, but I said to myself, if I succeed, they will become the biggest band on my roster, and then I will be fired because I'm not big enough to run their business.
Uh-huh.
So I made a calculated decision, and I wouldn't say I passed on them because it wasn't a please hire us. It was
Mhm.
more of a like, would you consider doing this? Do you want to talk further?
Mhm.
And I just took that as this just doesn't bode well for me. And I'm still friendly with this band. This band has been very successful and would have been the biggest band on my roster and probably would have fired me because I'm not big enough.
I have some guesses on who I think you know what? I'm gonna ask you. There's a private chat. I'm gonna send you.
Oh, look
Look
at
on the
that.
side screen.
If you get it on the first guess,
This is my guess. This is my guess.
this is unfair to the listeners.
It
No,
is.
but you're gonna love this because
Am I
I'm gonna tell
close?
them you're what's that?
Am I close?
You're actually not. There
Oh.
But what I can tell you is the band that you shared is
Uh-huh.
Taking Back Sunday, and since
Sure.
it's not, I can answer that. I'm from Long Island, been friends with those guys forever. Eddie, their original guitarist, who's kind of like Long Island hardcore legend, was thrown out of pretty much every band on Long Island at one point and another, including Taking Back Sunday much later in their career. He was begging me to manage them. And this was when they're playing to like 20 people a night.
Mhm.
And I was also chasing brand new for management at the same time.
Oh.
And there was always this rivalry. And I decided that the band I wanted to try to manage was brand new. And I couldn't chase after both of them.
Hmm.
So I didn't continue the attempting to manage Taking Back Sunday and put my focus on brand new. Didn't end up getting brand new either, but maintained a great relationship with them, was seriously considered for the job managing them multiple times. And my
Mhm.
friend Jillian Newman, shortly after that moment, began managing Taking Back Sunday and has been with them for like probably 22, 23 years now at this point. And, everything has worked out just fine for everyone. But it was not that band. I do love that you just threw a band in there and I gave you a story though.
So are they the different coast?
No, but they're not a Northeast band. But I'm not going any further. I can't.
I want to ask you this as we were talking before we started on air. You mentioned that you're teaching a class. One of the greatest moments of my music career was while on tour in the UK. We got to play at a college. I think I have the badge up there somewhere on my wall because I
Hopefully, it's
really.
not the one that fell off since we've been talking.
Oh, is it something fell? I don't know. Maybe it's a poster. Oh, a
The
poster.
other side.
Okay, a poster fell. No, there's like a badge I have from
Oh,
playing in this
okay.
college in Bath in the UK, and it was just a thing to do. We didn't think anything of it, right? It was like you play some songs in the
Yeah.
day, but there's a Q&A moment, and these kids were just asking us all these questions about touring and what it's like to be a musician, because we had a little bitty deal with this little label that's one guy in the UK. So that was like so much fun because you see people's faces get all happy and then you see them just drop and tell them the reality of the business. Now you have you teach one class about the music industry. Tell us a little bit about that because it seemed really interesting what you were saying.
Yeah, so I teach a class at Hofstra University, which is one of the bigger universities in the New York area. And the class doesn't really have a good name. I literally think it's called like Music Biz 105 is literally the name. But the concept of the class is first day of school, I meet with everyone in the classroom, talk to everyone, get an understanding of their musical skills and knowledge of the music industry. and then I break them up into a bunch of individual groups, and they each have to start a band.
Mhm.
And that band they have different assignments every week. And the first week's assignment is come back with a name and I think a logo. A logo may have been week 2. But it's basically they start with nothing. And
Mhm.
throughout the class, it's create a name, a logo, a bio, cover a song, write an original song, write a treatment for a music video, shoot a music video,
Mm.
release your music on the streaming platforms, create a marketing plan for those songs. And finally, the final assignment of the semester is they have to book a show and play a show and perform. So it's interesting because in some ways I don't consider myself a professor at all and really laugh when people call me Professor Nichols, but I am teaching them how to do something. And it's something that I do as second nature all the time, which is help a band keep their vision of who and what they want to be and helping them bring it to fruition. And the head of the department who brought me in was basically like, you're a no-brainer for this job. You're just doing what you already do, but do it with the kids. And I kind of come in the classroom with a different mindset than the other professors I hear that teach the same class because I tell them it's like, like in the music industry, you have hard deadlines and soft deadlines. You have assignments that you have to do. And
Mhm.
if you miss some of these soft deadlines, like I'm not going to fail you for it, but please don't screw around. But when you get to your hard deadlines, I will fail you if you don't do this. And your hard deadlines are like release date. If release date is July 13th, you damn well better have your song released on that day
Yeah.
because in the music industry, no one ever meets deadlines, for like the nonsense stuff. But when you get to like record needs to be out on this date, everybody figures out a way. So I'm just kind of like training them in the same ways of how the business works. Like, you can get away with this one, but these are things you just cannot get away with because these are solid release dates that, other companies come into play with your work.
What's the response like from the students?
So the word I get from other students is that they really like the style and like how it goes. But it's okay. Like it's interesting. Last year I absolutely loved my class and I'm still talking to a lot of the kids. This year I've got like a handful of stoners who are just baked sitting in the back of the classroom
Mhm.
and it's so hard to find a way to get them to engage.
Mhm.
And I just like the last class I had, I'm like starting to break through with the stoners who were too big to talk. And the answer was talking about weed. Like that.
Things that will get you arrested and banned from Canada. You're like
Yes. But, in that instance, I was talking to them about, like their photos and their video shoots that were coming up that they need to do. And I'm like, what is the vibe? What is your band about? The guy's,
Mhm.
I don't know. I just want to smoke a blunt and chill. And and you get that as an answer. And it's like, I'm not a teacher. Like I'm like, I'm here because I want to help people. And I'm
Mhm.
like, fuck you. Like when I hear
Mhm.
that answer, that's what I want to say.
Mhm.
But where I went with it, it's like, all right, well, how are we going to take smoking a blunt and chilling and make it your image?
Yeah.
And like just
Interesting.
forcing them to talk about what they just brought up. And like I could tell it's like the kids saying that to kind of get me to shut up because, the professor is not going to come back and start talking about smoking blunts.
Mhm.
But like, I'm like, let's drill down on the smoking blunts thing. And like that, that's the challenge, but it's kind of fun too. Like with these, like as much as like that annoys me, I kind of love the challenge as well.
There's a lot of talk in the music media sphere or the music podcast sphere about nepo babies. I'm not the biggest fan of that discourse because there's always been children of well-known people that have succeeded or failed in the arts.
They
I'm
seem
a
to
huge Star
succeed at a
Wars.
much higher volume though, unfortunately.
It seems like it, but if you watch movies from the 70s, you'd be surprised how many people are like the children of industry people. That being
Oh yeah.
said, that being said, do you feel that and maybe I need to pull back a little bit more. There's not music programs. Instruments are expensive. It's hard to find places to just be loud, right? If everybody in the band uh, lives in an apartment with their parents, no one probably has a place to rehearse.
Yeah.
So, is it harder for a certain type of individual to come up in the era? Let's just call it the nepo baby era, then, in
Yeah.
the era of access.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's 2 separate things to what you're asking.
Sure.
There's the nepo baby,
Mhm,
which, that shit just pisses me off beyond belief.
mhm,
But then there's the people who are lucky enough to come from means, whether it be, a family with more economic stability than
mhm,
others or whatever it may be. And I look at them as, they're it's different than a nepo baby because this is just like maybe your parents worked really hard. Maybe they worked 80 hours a week and you never saw them,
yeah.
but you're getting an opportunity because of it. So it's a different scenario. But then you drill down to this other level and you have people who, 6 people live in one apartment. There's no room to do anything. There's no money to buy you that guitar. And as they get a little older, it becomes they can afford to take a year off and drop out of life and just try this music thing.
Mhm,
And if you come from an unfortunate, socioeconomic background, that's not an opportunity for you.
yeah.
So what I feel like you find so much in the arts these days is you have to have some kind of means to support you, to allow you to live out the stream. And like that's incredibly disappointing to me. But I don't think that's a new thing. I
Mhm,
think we're more awakened nowadays. And I'm going to borrow that term from Howard Stern. So last week, Howard Stern went off on being called woke. And he's
mhm,
like, I don't know what the hell woke is. This sounds like the stupidest thing ever. But, if woke means be awakened and being an enlightened individual, then yes, I am. So like I just loved that approach. And it's
mhm,
like, I think nowadays there's a lot of us who view these things differently than we may have 30 years ago. And I don't know that the situation's changed. I think there's, in some groups of people, there's more empathy and understanding. Not
mhm.
in all groups. There's
Yeah.
a good 50% of this country that doesn't fall into that. But I think that other 50% is more empathetic and understanding and seeing these trends than we used to.
Mhm. Is the nepo baby thing affecting your business? Not so much.
You know, It depends on what you mean. Do you mean like I didn't get a job somewhere because some rich executive's, son or daughter got the job instead?
Mhm.
Or do you mean just like rich people in general getting more access?
Both.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Maybe it does. Like I try to live a life where I'm not looking at everyone else. Like that artist who I think you have booked in the future or hopefully do that. Can
Yeah.
you say his name, by the way? I don't
Yeah, we can
mind
say his name
saying it.
because he's coming on the show,
Yeah.
Aaron
Yeah,
Gillespie, yeah.
cool. Yeah, so Aaron Gillespie, who I've managed for many, many years, still manage him even though I don't manage Underoath anymore. Um, I always say to him because he's always looking at other people and that they're so much more successful, there's so much more this or that. And I always tell him comparison is the theft of joy.
Oof.
And I don't know where I heard that from. I
Oof.
don't think I came up with it. I'm pretty sure I heard it from someone else, but it's what I just try to remind myself of all the time. So when you bring that example up, like those
Mhm.
people exist. I see them. It always annoys me, but I don't want it to dictate how I live my life.
Mm. No, I heard not that exact quote because it's a great quote, but I heard something similar from a friend of mine who's a tech for a bunch of metal bands, and he was talking about how each band is envious of the other one, regardless of where
Always.
they are. And he's like, well, Testament guys are envious of the Slayer guys, and they're envious of Metallica. He goes, I'm sure Metallica's envious of the Rolling Stones. He's like,
No, exactly, and, like, I've had this conversation with Aaron a
"Hmm,
lot, and, like, Aaron, has a lot of anxiety, uptight, different things. And everything I'm saying, he'll tell you. He said
Mm-hmm.
in other podcasts, so I'm not like rolling on my friend
Mm-hmm.
in any way either. But one of the things I tell him, it's like, like Taylor Swift to most of us is the biggest artist in the world. She's not the most streamed artist every year.
Nope.
And like pretty much like last year it was Miley Cyrus with Flowers. And it's like, I bet you that she's jealous that Miley Cyrus got more streams than she did. And I bet you that Miley Cyrus, somewhere deep down, although she seems a little bit more centered, is jealous of what she has. And it's just, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what you have in any part of this, somebody's going to want something more. And, if you're Paul McCartney who has everything, what does he want? He wants to be young like everyone else. He's probably jealous of that.
That's an interesting point. That even Paul McCartney wants something. No,
I'm sure he does.
Yeah, no, that's very true. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen? Like, how does when streaming hit the way it's hit? I know it's getting late, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. When streaming hit, it changed, the pay structure for a lot of people, right? Because if you got stuff on radio, there's a thing, a friend of mine and I, who's also a musician, we do a music show where we talk about an entire year's worth of music, right? Like with the 1971 was the greatest year of music, and we'll go through all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things we always say is we were never going to get on the radio, so we don't really care about streaming. Like that revenue was we were never going to get on MTV. So if I get a nice payout of $27 from my Spotify streams, thanks. It doesn't bother me. But if you were getting those big ass ASCAP checks from radio plays and videos, you're gonna feel a little bit different about streaming. How has that affected the way you have to approach things?
So I'm going to push back on that mindset a little bit, and then we could go to some of the other things. But I find a lot of people, and I'm going to get some hate mail for this because I always do when I say this. It's like, in a lot of ways, I don't know that streaming is underpaying people today. And it goes to what you just said. It's like, no one was buying our record before. Now we're not making any money on streaming. But if you were selling CDs a lot for a lot of years, then hopefully you're going to stream a lot for a lot of years. And what happens is we're paying for access to music today versus instant ownership. And a lot of these bands who did make a difference in people's lives, people are now making micropayments to listen to them for their entire life. And using, like Underoath as an example, if you bought Chasing Safety or Define the Great Line in 2004, 2006, you're not buying it again. Like it's over. You love it. You're going back and you're playing it at home and you're not engaging. And Underoath gets royalty checks every year for not a lot of money, but a decent amount of money because people are going back and listening to those songs that they love every year. And I don't know that they would be making that much money today from those albums or CDs if people still bought physical music, because it's the old fans who are continuing to engage. And at some point you hit that tipping point where you're making more money because people listen to you for a lifetime and they're paying every time they listen.
I don't think that's wrong. I think this is just my opinion. We're two guys giving opinions at this point, right? I agree with what you said. And let's take Underoath, for example. They have a moment in the aughts that they're a pretty big band. They're selling CDs. They're on MTV. And then you're not. And MTV goes the way of the dodo. I don't know how involved they are in their YouTube channel, to try to monetize that stuff.
And they can't make most of the money on it either. There's so many
that's
other
that's going somewhere else, right? Who owns the rights to that stuff? So the interesting thing that you're bringing up is when the world says they're done with you, your fans may not be, but If you
Exactly.
own that music, you can play that music in your home forever. And as people got rid of their CD collection, now you're kind of forced into these streaming services, and that's a whole different conversation we can get into. We don't have to,
Yeah.
but the fact that an artist can still make money on something that someone it isn't trying to buy, right? They
Yeah.
weren't. There wasn't going to be a retrospective video on their stuff that came out that reconnected people with it. Um, Outside of physically selling stuff at the show, it's nice to have a little bit of something come in and know that you're still relevant in a way that goes beyond the regular trappings, right? Radio and music television.
No, exactly, and it's funny because I don't even talk about that kind of thing very often because it's an unpopular opinion, but I came up in a music industry where I never thought I was gonna make a dime from royalties for any of my bands, like, that was
Mhm.
just like, whatever, that's not the money we're gonna make the money from shows
Yeah.
and merch, like, that's what it's about, and, there does need to be fairness, but the definition of fairness, I think, needs to be drilled down on further, but taking a step back and also getting to answer your question is, both of us are at an age where we remember before streaming.
Yeah.
And we had this era between buying CDs and streaming where everyone was just downloading music and
Mhm.
using Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa and all these services to access music, you know, air quotes illegally. But
Mhm.
what that moment did, which has stayed true post illegal downloading, is it untethered artists to connect with people globally in a different fashion. So going back to that band, the Pilfers, that I mentioned that I managed earlier, they were signed to Mojo Records, which was distributed through Universal Music Group.
Mhm.
Universal Music Group told us that there wasn't interest to release the band in Europe.
Wow.
We were getting demand for the band to come and tour Europe. And, it was twofold. One, you know, Cooley Ranks was like a ska legend and people knew who he was over there. So they wanted him to come over. And the other guy in the band had somewhat of a following there.
Mhm.
And, you had the earliest of days of the internet going on then. And Napster explodes and people are downloading their music illegally. We're seeing $0 when they're doing it illegally, but
Mhm.
they downloaded it to such a degree that we booked multiple tours to tour there without ever releasing music because the fans decentralized how music is listened to. And I ended up being a witness in the Napster lawsuit of the RIA
No
versus Napster.
shit.
I was
Wow.
deposed in that case, and I took the stance of we need tools to distribute music.
Mhm.
And I did not support that they were ripping the bands off, but I did support the concept of my artist was going to make more money because the music was distributed for free.
Mhm.
And so that's it's a very nuanced thing. But the thing I'll
Yeah.
say, which is to answer your question now of like what's changed in my time, I think the biggest thing that has changed is there are no longer gatekeepers telling you you can't do things that you used to not be able to do on your own. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna win, but it
Mm.
means that you could get to the starting line, and in the
Yeah.
past, you couldn't even get there.
Um, you have been on the record talking about Ticketmaster and their monopoly on live music. I've spoken at length.
Alleged monopoly.
Alleged monopoly. We don't want them shutting me down. I have enough issues with the stuff we say on this show. I've talked at length about like the future of live music being more of an exclusive um, endeavor. WrestleMania is going to be in Saudi Arabia because they bought WrestleMania. I'm sure you saw that Riyadh Comedy Festival that happened recently.
There's
Uh,
so many opinions in all of
yeah,
that.
we don't even have to get into if you care about it. It's just that
No, no, no,
there's
it's just
money going
it's so
into
layered.
right into this kind of entertainment. And one of the things that I was thinking because I worked in the back end of live entertainment, meaning I'm
Yeah.
looking at the numbers. And when I saw the Fire Festival, one of the things that we were talking about was like, this might kind of be the future of the way people want to experience music festivals. It's super exclusive. The whole thing is like a VIP experience. There's 4 or 5 VIP sections at Coachella that you pay for. And then there's like the super duper VIP that, you have to sign an NDA to go into,
And then
right?
there's a village you could live in, I've seen now on
Yeah,
TikTok.
that's there. That's part of with the
Yeah.
yurts and stuff. So I don't think, how can I put this? There's these cruises,
Yep,
right?
and on some of those.
All these rock cruises.
Those are actually not exorbitantly priced. Of all the things that you've
Mhm,
just listed,
mhm,
the cruises you can do where you're basically paying a couple of $100 extra
mhm.
to be living in an experience for multiple days and having all the trappings that you get from a traditional cruise.
And
Like,
get to
I'm
be
not a cruise fan, but man, that model of what that company has built, I think is unbelievable, and I'm a huge fan of what they've done and the experiences they deliver for fans, but just had to point that out because it
No, but
doesn't
it's
seem
still
like it would be.
it's still crazy that we have all these, the new way to experience music is to truly experience music and,
Yeah,
on the water and hang out with the band afterwards,
yeah.
sipping Mai Tais by the pool. Um, how is this affected again? How has this affected your job? Has it made it easier because you were, if you're dealing with Underoath, I don't want to say nostalgia, but they are an act that has a 20-year-old record
Yeah,
that is somewhat important to people. It does open you up to be able to play some of these nostalgia cruises. Does it make
yeah.
it easier to deal with those kinds of artists? Does it make it harder for new artists?
So I'm just not gonna answer your question at all and be a total politician, and not because I don't want to, and we can get there, but I gotta tell you, the hardest thing with everything that you just talked about
Mhm.
is those middle class artists of like the Underoath level.
Yeah.
They can't even necessarily afford to go to these things because of how expensive it is.
Mhm.
Like, that Coachella show, like, that costs God knows what, and you have to go get an Airbnb out there for the weekend,
Mhm.
like, do they make enough money? And, like, some of them probably do, some don't, they're on but can these artists that we're paying to entertain us even afford to attend these events that are presenting them? And, like, that's something that just really fucks with my brain.
But, Randy, I don't know if you saw this, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to me because I'm getting kind of nostalgic memories of hanging out with you all over Orange County that day.
Yeah.
Um, I just saw a video of Shirley Manson from the band Garbage. You see that video?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So for those that don't know, Shirley Manson from the band Garbage, right, pretty decently successful band, you would think. They were playing a pretty decent sized room in Colorado, in Denver. And they said, this is the last tour that we can do in the interior of the United States because we cannot afford it anymore. And you could just feel the air come out of the room, and you could feel the knife going through everyone from the fans to the band to the crew to everybody when she said that, because what Randy's saying is like these middle class artists that maybe if you're not a middle class artist, you think, well, they're rock stars. It's like, there's a difference. Those buses really hurt when those buses cost hell of money a week. Um, for her to say we can't play here anymore because we can't afford it. Again, what does that mean? I'm saying that I think the future of music, as I'm seeing venues close left and right, and I'm seeing the experience be more highbrow, it feels like F certain parts of the United States. If you really want to see the band, drive to New York, drive to LA, maybe Florida, but Chicago, we're done with you. We can't do it.
Yeah.
How are the bands adjusting to this? Are they just, all right, we just do more of these cruises, or
No, I mean, I think a lot of people aren't drilling down to these levels. It's just like, what can we do? Where can
Mhm.
we make it work? It's the scramble to figure out what we can and can't do. And then a lot of it, take a band like Underoath, and again, I don't manage them anymore, but obviously I've known them for many, many years. And like, there's only so many things you could do in your life. You can't afford to do everything. And if they took their kids to every music event that they wanted to go to on a regular basis, they may not be able to afford to do that at this point. And like, people don't think one music, especially pop music, has gotten so expensive,
so expensive?
and everyone just assumes that, like, every artist is rich.
Mhm.
And like, I think the artists are dealing with some of these same issues with these things on the personal level. Thankfully, most of us have relationships to get in for free, so we have a skewed reality. But I also say, if anyone deserves to get in for free, it should be, all of those jesters up dancing to entertain the rich people anyway.
Mhm.
Like, they at least deserve to get in. But, it's really unique. But, these experiences are, a way to increase the amount of money that artists can make, because you can charge more for a lot of these experiences and people are willing to pay for it. And, like, Live Nation's CEO took a major attack. I think it was 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
when he stood on stage at some conference and said the ticket prices aren't high enough. I don't know if you heard
Jesus
about this.
Christ. No. Tell me
But
about it.
yeah, so, and if you Google it, anyone after this, you'll see, like, he literally stood on stage and said ticket prices aren't high enough. But what he meant is that people are still willing to pay more. And that in sports, like, courtside seats to a game
Mhm.
selling for $20,000 is like a badge of honor for the Lakers.
Mhm.
For a musician to do that, they're ripping off their fans. And there's this interesting fine line where there is somebody willing to pay $20,000 for that equivalent of a courtside seat to a concert.
Mhm.
And if somebody wants that experience, we should be creating a scenario for them to pay for it. And that's sort of, not that I know the guy, but
Mhm.
just knowing this business and knowing kind of that mindset, that's what a lot of these people mean. And I think at times musicians aren't I shouldn't say I think, I know at times musicians aren't properly compensated for the performances that they're playing. And this is the thing that I talk about a lot. It's funny we haven't touched on this, because ticketing and scalping and all these other things
Yes.
is such a huge portion of what I talk about. Like, if anyone wants to look for me on LinkedIn, you'll find me ranting about this on a regular basis. But what's happened is the ticket scalpers have lobbied the government to create laws to protect them to scalp tickets. So
Insane.
you put a show on sale at $50. Scalper buys that ticket at 50, sells it for 100. The
Mhm.
scalper has now made more money than the person on stage, because the person on stage has to pay all the expenses for the event.
Yep.
And all the scalper had to do was just pay for the original ticket.
Yep.
And the ticket scalping industry, this is probably going to make your head explode, is a $10 billion a year business in the US, backed by large private equity firms.
Mhm.
And these companies are making a fortune. And this is where, technically, and I don't say that we should do this as an industry, but it tells you that if you look at it as a market, as like a capitalist, that we're underpricing our tickets if somebody else is going to buy them and sell them for double. But the fix should not be that we need to now sell our tickets for double, which is what the CEO of Live Nation is saying.
Mhm.
And what I'm saying is, we need laws to protect us from the scalpers who are making more money than we are for our own art.
What about the fees? Sometimes I get to do live podcasts, and I'll tell you, Randy, if you ever want to manage a live podcast, we're really calm. We don't have a lot of needs,
Not a lot of
and
stage diving.
no stage diving, so there's no lawsuits, and we usually sell out. There's that. But Yeah, way more people come to see me rant than to see me sing. But there's a price that we're getting paid for every ticket sold, and that price is nowhere near what people are paying. And then there's like VIP meet and greets that are involved, so there's extra fees on top of that. And we did a show in LA. It was our first thing we had done, and people weren't necessarily complaining, but they were like, you know, I paid such and such for this. And it's like, I don't know how much you paid, but that sounds like a lot of money. And we had to go through these venues that were using Ticketmaster, and it was literally double. Like they were paying double than what we were getting paid per head. So what say you about Ticketmaster and their absorbent amount of fees that they throw on top of this stuff?
So I'm gonna have an opinion that is different than most, but it is actually factual as
Okay.
well.
Mhm.
And we could probably do an hour another day just about ticketing and fees because I've gone down the rabbit hole more than probably any individual on earth on this topic. I'll send you
Mhm.
some stuff afterwards if you want to see it.
Yes.
But the way fees actually work, what's really going on with fees is the vast majority of that fee
Mhm.
is going to the venue and the promoter and not Ticketmaster.
Okay.
Everybody believes that Ticketmaster is screwing their customers and charging high service fees. In reality, what's going on is the venue is the customer of Ticketmaster, not the fan. Whether you like it or not, that's what's actually going on.
Mhm.
And Ticketmaster created these fees as a way to raise more money for the venues. And part of Ticketmaster's job is just to be the bad guy and let people scream and yell at these fees.
Mhm.
And then, like 70-80% of this fee is just passed right along to the venue and the promoter. And nobody knows that. And Ticketmaster, they don't care. They're getting their 20% or whatever it is of the fee.
Mhm.
And it's just a way for the venue to make more money. But what I need to say, which is important to all my friends who run the venues, because this is a very two-sided thing,
Mhm.
is that a lot of artists nowadays are charging more and more money to play shows for the venues because all our expenses have gone up. And
Yeah.
when you're talking about independent venues, you know, they're expensive to run. They don't have Live Nation backing them. So they've created these fees as a way to make up for the lost money they're getting because they're on paper overpaying the bands because a company like Live Nation can afford to overpay them because they have an advertising business and all these other businesses where they're making money off the fans.
Mhm.
So while the fees are messed up, they're not as clear cut as somebody's just greedy and taking them. And it's all incredibly nuanced. And I'm not defending any of these people, but there's much more to it than most people understand.
Aren't Ticketmaster in bed with Live Nation when it comes to the
It's the
promoter as
same
well?
it's the same company,
Yeah.
but they're not promoting everything. Like
No, they're not.
I'm part of a collective of a group called the Fix the Ticks Coalition, and it's
Mhm.
20 plus live event businesses that are all independent who are working on A-level events that none of them are Live Nation.
Mhm.
And then you also have AEG and Peachtree Entertainment and a bunch of other companies who are doing business
Golden Voice.
that are yeah, no, Golden Voice is AEG. So,
Mhm.
it's not all Live Nation. And, I where people really sometimes will get upset with me is, when I said alleged monopoly of
Mhm.
Live Nation Ticketmaster, I don't know if they are a monopoly by definition, but, are they close to it? Is it worthy of an investigation? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But there's more competition than people realize in a lot of these areas, but they're winning the business due to the vertical integration of so many different businesses into one, but they don't necessarily have the market share to call them a monopoly. So it's a fine line.
Hmm. because that's the thing that people in the chat were complaining about as well when we're talking about artists that can't tour. There was someone said I'd pay more for an artist if I didn't have all these fees from Ticketmaster, but it looks like
Exactly.
now we're
And
going to take away.
yeah, what I'm trying to tell the industry to do, and I'm just one little guy who happens to have a really big fucking mouth though, is that we need to do away with fees. And ultimately, it doesn't mean that people are going to make less money who need those fees to survive.
Yeah.
But let's just keep all those numbers between the artist and the venue. And because anytime you see a fee, you're angry. And if it's going to cost $75 to put on a show, don't call it 50 plus 25, call it 75, and everyone's going to be a lot happier. And
Mhm.
I see people from both the artist side and the venue side having differing opinions. Nothing quite aligns with everyone, but I'm working my ass off to try to find a way to make the fees disappear. And the sad thing for fans is, like I said, it's not going to mean that you pay less, but you'll be less pissed off while paying too much.
Would you rather get back into that side of the entertainment business, throwing maybe larger shows, smaller festivals,
Not
or is that
really.
just another kind of headache?
Nah, I wanna. So next time we could talk about this too, because I do
Sure.
gotta go on soon.
Yeah.
But I spend a lot of time now advising music tech startup businesses. Like
Okay.
I was an early investor in a company called Bands in Town, which I
Yep.
assume a lot of the listeners know.
Yep.
Same thing with a company at Venue, which a
Mhm.
lot less people will know, but
I know at
manages
Venue.
food and beverage and
Mhm.
merchandise. Deeply involved with that company from launch until about a year ago. And that stuff honestly excites me more these days. And I think some of it's, where we talked about, in the beginning of this conversation where people like the music today or this today, was better in my time. I'm just like, there's less things that excite me nowadays. So rather than judge it, I'm like, what other things can I do that do excite me? And I love business. I love building. And I've enjoyed helping friends to build companies. And that gives me that same joy that I used to get standing on stage, watching 3,000 people sing along to a song. Now, like everybody knowing what Bands in Town is. When I started working with them and my job was to introduce it to the industry and no one knew what it was. And now it's like, of course I know what that is. So like
Yeah.
that gives me that same kind of excitement. So that's really what pulls me in more today than anything.
I know at Venue because I've worked merch at some smaller festivals.
There
It's
you go. Great platform though, right?
it's the number one platform for merchandise. I think they have to use it at Coachella now. I could
Yeah, I
be
think so
wrong.
too.
I could be
Yeah, I'm
wrong,
pretty
but
sure they use it.
I think they have to use it there now because a lot of things changed over the last few years. But Randy, I know it's getting late where you are. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. People are saying it in the chat. I'm saying it as someone that knows you, that is shaking your hand in real life. Would you be willing to come back on the show?
I absolutely would. And I got to tell you, I was telling my friends today, I'm doing some podcast. I don't even know what it is. Like, I forgot that I agreed to do this. I was like, why the hell did I agree to talk to someone at 9 o'clock at night? This is the last thing I want to do. And I really, to follow that part up, I really enjoyed this. This was fun. And it's funny because I was talking to a friend earlier today and
Mhm.
said to them, I agreed to do this. I don't know why I did, but I went back to look at the email exchange to see what I agreed to do. And I said, I really like you, so I'm going to do this, even though it's late. And I'm like, I don't remember the context, but I remember if I said that, I believe me. It's like, I just no bullshit. I wouldn't say that to you if I didn't mean it. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I said it. So therefore, I'm going to do this. And my instincts were right. And this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing this.
Oh man, you dropped so many gems on me. You were like, you can't incorporate. Look, man, if you're playing a 200 seat room, maybe it's not time for you to incorporate. But once you get to the 1,000 seaters, you probably should incorporate. And I'll dude, certain things you said to me. Again, I don't know if you remember that day. We were
I remember
driving.
the day kind of, to be honest. I'm trying to rack my brain for where you fit into it, but I remember the day because it was like a big moment.
Yeah, yeah, it was a big because my buddy. was kind of like the band. I don't want to say the band leader, but he was like maybe like you probably call him a music director in another kind
Yeah, I
of
think
group.
that would probably be the best term.
That's the best title that you can have for that guy. And so he was really tight with Aaron. So then I'm his buddy. So then I get to roll around with these guys. And we were driving with the owner of the venue, and we were driving around Anaheim. And I just remember Aaron asking, like, "Oh, are we going to be big enough to play this place?" You're like, "No. Maybe Underoath can play there every night. You can play there." And there was this like, I just remember this, just watching that and seeing that level of honor. Like, no, you're not there yet. But this band can play there. You can't play there. Maybe you can play this venue.
So when you talk to Aaron, one of the things that he'll tell you about me and about managers in general is you need someone to tell you no. And you probably heard me tell Aaron no 1,000 times that day. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people in this industry are lacking. And it's really important. I had this conversation in the class that I teach this week about Kanye West. And I was like, Kanye West is a combination of mental illness and people afraid to say no because he makes them too much money. And you need people to say no.
Maybe that's management in a nutshell. My job is to say no when it matters.
Yeah, and a little bit of Nazi in there too. I think it's more mental illness than Nazi. By the way, I'll give you a parting story that ties together your friend Jay Velarde, who introduced us that day. And this is the shit of management. And Jay was the band leader for many years in the band. Jay and Aaron had, I don't even want to call it a falling out, but like differing views on things. Aaron decided whatever he wanted to do next. He didn't want to work with everyone that he worked with previously. Aaron started the band, but then shortly after hired guys like Jay, who really helped run and musical direct the band. Aaron felt, I don't need to tell anyone what I'm doing. Like, I'm just doing something else now. It's my project. It's my thing. And literally didn't even call Jay to say that he's going to make a record and, go out and play shows without him, because he wasn't a part of it anymore in Aaron's mind. And I went to Jay. I still remember where I was. I was backstage when Underoath played the Sun Dome in Tampa, and told Jay what was happening to him. And as you can imagine, he wasn't happy. And Jay and I did not speak again. Like, this is probably like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. He's one of my favorite people in the world. I don't know if you still talk to him.
This whole thing came about because I randomly saw, I'm sorry to keep you for 5 minutes longer.
Oh, no, it's all right. This is an important story. So
when we were all hanging out, I couldn't tell you the year because I don't remember the year, but Jay ended up working for Underoath. So he'd always call me up. Hey, dude, you want to just roll for a while? So I would go hang out with them kind of all over. And I was around when they were filming that documentary thing that came out where they were bitching about the money and how much was going this way.
The one, there's a whole scene ripping me apart in that.
I was in the room. I'm like, I was like, Jay, how was I not in this? Because I remember being in that room. I remember that conversation. And so I was talking to Jay, just shooting the shit, and he was like, I'm not in the business anymore. I don't do this. I was like, Jay, come on the show. He's like, no. He goes, not because I don't love you, but no.
And I totally get it. And this adds to what you said perfectly. So, I had to tell Jay, I'm like, dude, this is what's happening. I'm sorry. I had to tell you. Somebody had to tell you what's going on. He was mad at me because I couldn't stop Aaron in what he was doing. Prior to me telling him that, like, Jay and I talked all the time. We were just like friends. Like, we were talking, like, he was telling me he wanted to get more into real estate. I'm like, oh, if there's a way, I could put in a little money in a house if you're going to buy houses and flip them. I'm like, let's do something. I want to work with you. And it went from that to me telling Jay that to not speaking to him for 8 years. And I would text him like once a year and be like, dude, I understand why you're not happy with me, but just want to let you know I still love you. And when you're ready, I'm here to be your friend. And text him like that, like once a year. And 3 or 4 months ago, I saw something that made me think of him. And I texted him and he wrote back. And I was just like, yes, like, he's back. And, I only talked to him that day, and he apologized in that moment for not writing back to me. And I was like, dude, I get it. Like, I understand. And this is all part of management is like, it can fuck up your life in many ways too. He's one of my favorite people. My wife loves him. Like we all just like, he was an important person in my life, but due to a decision that someone else made, it did serious damage to one of my relationships. And am I mad at Aaron for it? To some degree, yes. But it's like everybody has their own way of dealing with life, and you can't force people to be something they're not. Just as I couldn't force Aaron to not do what he did, and I couldn't
Mm.
force Jay to be like, fuck you, be my friend. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with this. And it's like
Yeah.
sometimes time is the only thing that management can do.
Well, I'm glad it all worked out. We all used to hang pretty tight. Aaron, and Jay, when they were in town, it was like we're gonna hang out. Aaron has been to the house I had when I lived in the Bay Area, so it is nice to reconnect with people that I haven't talked to, and she's probably close to 20 years. So again, thank you so
This
much for coming on,
this
Randy.
was a lot of fun. And like I said, if you ever want to talk ticketing, I'll share a bunch of the work I've done around this. I could do at least this much time with fascinating stories of what's going on with
Oh,
ticketing from all different crazy layers. Some stuff that I'll talk about and some that I won't because it's that crazy where I literally for this cliffhanger, I fear for my life, so I
oh,
won't talk
okay,
about
yeah. Say no more. I'll send you an email. We can work out a date.
it.
Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks.
That
Great
is
talking
Randy
to you.
Nichols, music manager. Oh, I'm going to the Champagne Room. Toussaint's going to meet me there. The link is already up for patrons. If you want to be a paid YouTube subscriber, hit the paid or join. I think it's a join button, and then you can get the message so you can join us as well. Toussaint wants to talk about what's that guy? D'Angelo. Sorry, D'Angelo passing. And she's like, why do no white people know about this? Why, Jason? Why don't the white people know? Why is that? So it'll be a good time in the Champagne Room. So on that note, I am out. See you soon.